Hey there, my name's Eric and thanks for checking out my channel, Mountaintop 9. This video, if you've clicked on it, then you're obviously a Black Sabbath fan and obviously a hardcore Black Sabbath fan at that. You're not one of these fans that's just into the Ozzy years or just into the Ozzy and Dio years and then everything else you don't give a shit about. No, if you clicked on this video, then you obviously care about the Tony Martin era just like I do. Now, starting out as a young child, from the time I was 5 years old, I was a heavy metal fan. My dad played me Bark at the Moon by Ozzy. He had The Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. He had Screaming for Vengeance by Judas Priest. Paranoid and Heaven and Hell from Black Sabbath. So a lot of these things all came together and from a young age were a huge influence on me. And I was always riveted by Black Sabbath, especially when I'd say when I was about 8 or 9 years old, there were these satanic panic books where they would talk about, you know, keep your kids from listening to heavy metal and from wearing black because there are secret messages contained within the music, satanic messages, you know, backmasking and all of this kind of stuff was swirling around at the time in the late 80s and even into the early 90s. There was still a little bit of that hysteria that would be played up on shows like Geraldo and you know the score if you were around back then, or I'm sure you've read about it if you weren't. But Black Sabbath was always mentioned in these books. I mean, Ozzy was a big character at that time, of course. You know, he had bit the head off the fucking bat and the dove and all this, and he was the madman of metal and everything. But there was something about Ozzy, even though he was a very interesting character to me at the time, and I love Ozzy, and I love his solo stuff, just like I love his Sabbath material, you know, the stuff he did with Sabbath. His music, his albums, you know, Diary of a Madman, Blizzard, Bark the Moon, Ultimate Sin, No Rest for the Wicked, all that stuff, it didn't have the mysteriousness that Sabbath did. You know, when I got into Black Sabbath hardcore when I was about 8 or 9, I started out with Paranoid and the self-titled album. And the first time I heard those church bells at the beginning of the title track on the Black Sabbath album, the first album, and then that chilling guitar tritone came in, you know, those chilling notes that Tony Iommi played so great. You know, it raised the hair on your arms. It gave you goosebumps when you'd hear that for the first time as a kid. Also, Electric Funeral, you know, the opener to side 2 of Paranoid. I mean, when I heard that riff to Electric Funeral, it was scary stuff back then. And all throughout the, you know, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, the title track and the album cover, different stuff here and there, you know, was kind of scary. And you always saw Black Sabbath mentioned and all this satanic pink stuff. So I loved the mysteriousness of that era. There weren't any documentaries out at that time. There weren't reams of literature written about Black Sabbath. So it was all a mystery. And I loved the dark image. You know, when you looked at pictures of Led Zeppelin, they looked like fucking flower child fucking hippies. But in a lot of the pictures of the original Sabbath lineup, they were wearing black and they were wearing the big crosses and they just looked downtrodden. They looked gloomy and shit, and I loved that. So, yeah, so that's how I got into Black Sabbath, and I was obsessed, man. I played those albums, Volume 4, Master of Reality, Sabotage, and then they had so much progression. I love Technical Ecstasy. You know, you know, stuff like It's Alright with Bill Ward singing, you know, that's kind of a goofy song and everything, but stuff like You Won't Change Me and All Moving Parts Stand Still and Gypsy and Dirty Women, that's classic material and showed such a great progression. It's hard to believe that the same band who was kind of chugging along and doing those really elephantine heavy riffs on stuff like Lord of this World and Into the Void, you know, and then on the next album, St. Vitus Dance and Under the Sun. Now they were playing stuff that was a lot more, there was a lot more production going on. So that progression on Technical Ecstasy really blew me away the first time I heard it. Same thing on Never Say Die. Now, Never Say Die has some filler on it, but there are great songs like Junior's Eyes and Johnny Blade. So, yeah, man, Those Ozzy albums are classics. No one can ever take that away. That's what got me started on the Black Sabbath road. And to this day, Black Sabbath is my favorite band. But one thing remains constant. Tony Iommi, to me, is Black Sabbath. If he was playing guitar and making heavy riffs, and they put Black Sabbath on the spine of the album, it's Black Sabbath. I don't give a fuck who was singing, you know? Whether it be Ozzy, Ronnie James Dio, Ian Gillan, Glenn Hughes, or Tony Martin. I love all of it. And that's what brings me this video. We're going to focus on the Tony Martin albums because it's a very maligned era. And I think it all comes down to, of course, he's following in the footsteps of two legendary frontmen in particular. We're going to, I mean, we don't even need to mention Ian Gillan and Glenn Hughes because they were only around for, it was a one-off thing with them. But he was following, Tony Martin was following in the footsteps of Ozzy and Ronnie James Dio. You know, I mean, you can't get any more legendary than that. He just didn't have the charisma. Tony Martin didn't. Tony Martin didn't have that charisma that those two guys naturally exuded on stage. I've watched live footage of Tony Martin fronted Black Sabbath, and he's just kind of up there, kind of waving around, and he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have that extra bit of oomph to his image. You know, he's kind of got the receding hairline going, and his face is kind of soft-featured and everything. I don't know. He just doesn't have anything that's real characteristic that sticks in your mind. I love the guy, but I think that's the reason, you know, his version of, you know, his Black Sabbath never caught on and never, you know, had the commercial success in the US, because in America you need that fucking visual thing. You know, this was the era when MTV and everything was going. Headbangers Ball came out in the late 80s and was big, and you needed that look for the music videos. So that's the thing. Tony Martin just didn't have the on-stage charisma that his predecessors had. But man, oh man, did he make up for it in the vocal department or what? Out of all the Sabbath singers, maybe except for Ian Gillan on songs like Disturbing the Priest and shit like that, Gillan really hit some high fucking notes on that Born Again album, didn't he? But besides that, taking that, putting that aside, Tony Martin's vocals on those Sabbath albums that he was on, Tear, Headless Cross, The Eternal Idol, those three in particular, he hit some high goddamn notes. I'm talking about window-breaking high notes that he couldn't even replicate live. The title track of Headless Cross, for years, he couldn't even replicate that chorus where he does the Headless Cross line. He had to have Jeff Nichols, the keyboard player who was off stage, would kind of help him along with those and do the real high parts back behind the stage in kind of a falsetto type fashion. So, you know, you gotta give credit to Jeff Nichols because he was a great person to work off for that era of Black Sabbath. He helped Tony Iommi so much in composing a lot of great Sabbath material in the 80s. But getting back to Tony Martin, man, oh man, just some great singing, especially on like the title track of Headless Cross. Devil and Daughter. Man, his singing on that song, good God, it's just earth-shatteringly great vocals. And then the chugging guitars. A lot of people complain about the production on those late 80s and early 90s Sabbath albums, especially Headless Cross, though. They say that it's got too much reverb and the drum sound it's too airy and big. What the fuck is wrong with that? What is wrong with these people who say that? Do you want everything dry? You know, these are the same people that wouldn't like an album like Hell Awaits by Slayer. They'd say, oh, it has too much reverb. I guess Rain and Blood's more you know, Rick Rubin came in and sliced out all the fucking reverb and made everything dry as a bone, which is fine. But what's wrong with an album that has a lot of reverb and has a big, airy, massive sound? I love that. That reverb adds atmosphere, you numbskulls. It's what makes an album like Headless Cross seem bigger than life and majestic and magical and huge. And I love that so much. And some other great songs on Headless Cross are Obviously, When Death Calls has a very haunting atmosphere to it. Call of the Wild, great track, great, you know, triumphant main riff. The chorus is spot on, and that's the thing about the Tony Martin era. And on Headless Cross, while we're talking about that album, lots of melodies, lots of great choruses, lots of stuff you can sink your teeth into, you know, and your ears, it's just ear candy, you know? Nightwing's a good song, Black Moon. Here's a copy of Headless Cross right here I have on CD. You gotta love that cover. It's just evil. I mean, it screams Black Sabbath. At this point in time in 1989, and Tony Martin really didn't know what to do. This was the first album where Tony Martin kind of had freedom to come up with lyrics and do stuff, because on Eternal Idol, all of the stuff was already done with Ray Gillen. But then Ray Gillen vacated the band, and Tony Martin had to come in on this one and, you know, do all the vocals over again. And basically just kind of copy what Ray Gillen did. That was his directive. That's what Tony Iommi and the production team wanted Tony Martin to do. So he didn't have a lot of freedom on this one, even though this is a great album. On Headless Cross, he had freedom. And he thought to said, hey, it's Black Sabbath. I'm going to write a lot of lyrics mentioning hell and Satan and death. And that's sure as fuck what he did. And it's kind of funny because it juxtaposes with a lot of upbeat riffs and really cool ear-catching melodies. And it's really cool because it's kind of poppy in parts. Not poppy in a bad way. I mean poppy in that catchy way. And here Tony Martin is singing about Satan, death, hell, you know, damnation, demons, all of this stuff. Another cool track on this is Kill in the Spirit World. That's another one. It's got a very catchy verse, but he's singing all these lyrics about death and everything. Nightwing is a great closer to this album. It's really cool and haunting. So yeah, Headless Cross is a fucking classic. And you know, all you Tony Martin Sabbath fans out there know that, how good this album is. There's the back. Now, my favorite, I'm kind of showing these all over the place, not in any particular order. This is just a fucking rant video, so I'm not putting this in, you know, gonna cut it up in a specific order. I'm just stream of consciousness type stuff here. Now we're going to talk about Tear. This is my, if I had to pick, my very favorite Tony Martin fronted album of Sabbath, this would be it. And this one goes a long ways back for me. I remember the cassette tape for Tear in the early 90s. You know, this cover looked even darker on the cassette version. And it just really caught my eyes because it looked so foreboding. And caught my eyes right away when I saw it in the metal section at this store. It was either at a Camelot Music or a Coconuts, one of those types of stores. And yeah, man, this stuff, Anno Mundi, the opening track on this fucking album, just like a lot of the Tony Martin stuff, bigger than life. It is majestic. It's haunting, and it just, the chorus, the notes he hits in the chorus are so pure and high, and you feel like you're just sailing through the sky. That's the way this music makes you feel. Anno Mundi is a classic opener. The next song is a galloping, hard-charging rocker, The Lawmaker. Man, you can't go wrong. It just makes you feel so alive. If you're ever feeling down and depressed, put on a song like The Lawmaker, man. If that doesn't put a fucking charge in you, man, then I don't know what to tell you. Because it doesn't get more fucking soaring than that. I love the Sabbath Stones. They originally were calling that, in the working stage, they were calling it Lunchbox. Because the song had such meaty riffs. And yeah, it starts off slow, Sabbath Stones does. But it goes into this great midsection and this great chorus type thing in the middle that is just so, like everything on this fucking album, soaring, triumphant. It makes you feel alive. So that's a great track. Jerusalem's a good track. Also, a power ballad type song, but not in a bad way. This is a power ballad as only Black Sabbath could have done it. I like the juxtaposition of the soft Tony Iommi guitar parts and Tony Martin is singing in a real soothing style. but then the hard charging, you know, Tony Iommi heavy ass riffs come in, and when Tony Martin's saying it feels good to me, it's really heavy. It's got this heavy rockin' good feeling to it. I love it. It makes you feel good listening to it. And then the solo section is haunting, as only Tony Iommi can do, and it really sticks in your memory. But yeah, man, Tear is an excellent album. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Definitely pick this one up. If you've never listened to it, I highly recommend it. I really do. This album to me, and Headless Cross, you know, this stuff is just as essential as Mob Rules, as Heaven and Hell, as Sabotage, you know, just as essential. You have to pick this up if you're a Black Sabbath fan. If you're just an Ozzy fan, then, you know, what can I tell you? You're missing out. You really are. I mean, what did you want? Did you want Master of Reality over and over again? Is that, I mean, did you want Paranoid over and over? You want to hear War Pigs Part 18? What's the fun in that? I mean, it's like these people. I remember going to an Iron Maiden show back when on the Brave New World tour. It was back in 2000. And Iron Maiden didn't play Run to the Hills. I remember walking through the parking lot and some fucking idiot said, "Hey, did you like the show?" And I said, "Yeah, I liked the fucking show. It's fucking Iron Maiden." And he said, "It sucked." And I was like, "Why?" And he said, "They didn't play Run to the Hills." It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Who gives a fuck they didn't play Run to the Hills? Is that really your favorite fucking Iron Maiden song, you stupid fucking prick? Yeah, Run to the Hills, it's like this classic Maiden song, no doubt, but who gives a fuck? Hasn't that song been played out? Who fucking cares they didn't play Run to the Hills? God, people are so fucking stupid. But anyway, let's move on a little bit, talk about another Tony Martin album for Sabbath. Let's talk about Cross Purposes. Now, at this point in 1994, things were changing. This album doesn't have Cozy Powell on drums. It has Bobby Rondinelli on drums. And, you know, I miss Cozy Powell on here, because Cozy Powell on Headless Cross, Cozy Powell had really a good partnership going with Tony Iommi. He was very instrumental in promoting and making these albums. He wasn't just the drummer. He was more than that. He was a team with Tony Iommi. And so it's sad that Cozy Powell was gone on this album. You know, things were different. The Dehumanizer album was made before this, and Cozy Powell had broken his leg in a horse riding accident. So, yeah. This album is when Tony Martin rejoined after leaving. And, yeah, man, this album starts out with a great song called Eyewitness. Fucking classic opener. Now, at this point, you could start to tell sort of a degradation in Tony Martin's voice. It had a little bit more of a grit to it. It wasn't as pure, as gold-throated as it was on Headless Cross and Tear. He was having a little bit more trouble hitting the high notes, I think, around the time of this album. But still, despite that, Eyewitness is a heavy, fucking fast-paced Sabbath opener. It's a classic in my mind. Cross of Thorns is a good song. Virtual Death is funny because it's got this really slow, doomy riff, and you can tell that Geezer Butler is on this goddamn album, let me tell you. It wouldn't surprise me if Geezer Butler had a lot to do with the track Virtual Death, because it's very similar to the kind of stuff that he was writing for Ozzy at the time, like Thunder Underground. You know, Geezer Butler liked those slow, fucking bass-heavy riffs, and it's funny, Virtual Death also has like very Alice in Chains-esque vocal melodies and patterns on it, so there's definitely some grunge influence of the time creeping in, especially for like Tony Martin, just as far as his singing was concerned. But this is still a great album. Not every song is what I would consider good. This is a step down. This album is a step down from Tear and Headless Cross. But, you know, I love the song The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. What a great moody song. It's got this really moody, heart-wrenching opening, and then it's got this bouncy type, Zero the Hero type riff going on, but then it launches into this really epic, cool, catchy chorus, and then back into the moodiness and everything. Great track. And, yeah, man, definitely, I mean, Cross Purposes is a good album. It's not a classic in the sense that Tear and Headless Cross are, but it's a good album, another good solid Sabbath album. You can't go wrong. Really, in my mind, the worst thing that Sabbath ever did, and it's still decent, was the last album they did with Ozzy, 13. That album's okay, but man, oh man, Ozzy sounds like a fucking robot on that album, and you just can't, I mean, it kind of kills the album. Also, it's very one-dimensional in my mind, 13 is. You know, The Devil You Know, where they went under the Heaven and Hell banner, that's a Sabbath album too. Don't let anyone tell you that's not a Black Sabbath album. That's a Black Sabbath album also, but it was kind of the same thing with Dio there towards the end. It was kind of getting a little bit too one-dimensional. So this album I'd put above those two. It's a good album. And then we got here Forbidden. This is considered by a lot of fucking numbskulls. You know, there's people that have never even probably fucking listened to the album, probably say it's a bad album, just because they've heard other people and they're fucking sheep. But this has got good tracks on it. I love, let's see on the back here, I Won't Cry For You is a great song. You know, it's got that, not really a power ballad, but it's a slower song. It's got evocative lyrics, a very haunting chorus to it, and melody. Kind of reminds me of stuff like You Won't Change Me off of Technical Ecstasy. It harkens back to those late Ozzy years. Sick and Tired is a good song. The title track, Forbidden, is a good song. And yeah, man, this is a good album. It's not bad. It's funny how they brought in this guy named Ernie C. from Body Count to help produce it, and I think Ice-T had some... Ice-T makes a little rapping appearance on the opening track, and you know, I'm not a rap fan, but it doesn't lessen that song in my mind. It kind of fits it in a way. It's not like Aerosmith with fucking Run DMC or something like that, so it doesn't fucking ruin it. He's only on there for a minute. And yeah, you could see further... This album was kind of cobbled together and put together at the last minute, because at this point, Tony Iommi just wanted to fulfill a recording contract, put out one last thing with Tony Martin, and move on to the Ozzy reunion, because that's where the big bucks were with Ozzy, you know, and that's just the way it was, and it's really sad, because Tony Martin, damn, man, I mean, just great stuff. I didn't talk about The Eternal Idol, but it's a good, solid album. The Shining's great. I love Glory Ride. If you want to fucking sum this album up with one song that tells you about the Eternal Idol, put on Glory Ride. Man, great track, you know. Born to Lose, catchy fucking song. And the title track on here, Eternal Idol. Talk about pure doom. It is probably, it's one of the doomiest Black Sabbath songs ever written and recorded, for sure. And that riff reeks of pure depression and morbidity and death. It's very, very evil, gloomy sounding riff. So yeah, man, I love all this stuff. And you know, like I said, man, grab up these Tony Martin albums if you can find them. One of these days they need re-released. They need special deluxe edition releases here in America. And yeah, man, they're just classic albums, and it's so sad that Tony Martin has been overlooked here. You know, in places like Germany and other countries, he's more accepted as a Black Sabbath frontman, whereas here in America, people are very one-dimensional, a lot of them, a lot of metal fans, and don't really look in. But it's starting to change, I've noticed, with the younger generation. I see more comments online praising the Tony Martin years, and I think that's because these are kids growing up that didn't have the baggage of the Ozzy years. They weren't constantly listening to Iron Man and shit like that, and then someone played them a song off Headless Cross, and they're like, what's that? That's totally different. I don't like that. I don't accept that. No. These kids don't have that baggage. So they're approaching it from a different vantage point. So hopefully the Tony Martin era will get a good reassessment and people will learn to appreciate it more. And I think that's what's going to happen, because these albums are just too classy. They really are. And I want to recommend two great books if you want to read about all eras of Black Sabbath and not just some bullshit book that just talks about the Ozzy years. You got to get first of all, get this book, Sabbath, Bloody Sabbath, The Battle for Black Sabbath by Gary Sharp Young. This book is very in-depth and thorough and has got a wealth of info about all eras of Black Sabbath. And that's what matters to us, fans of every part, every nook and cranny of Black Sabbath's career up to the point that this book was published is covered in here. So you definitely got to pick this up. Another one that's good that you can learn a lot from is Doom Let Loose, okay, by Martin Popoff. I think I'm saying his last name right, Popoff. Anyway, this book is excellent. Now, I don't always agree with Martin Popoff because he gives track-by-track breakdowns of every Black Sabbath album in here. And there's some songs that I just love that he totally trashes, and vice versa. There's songs that he heralds as the greatest thing ever, and I think, what the fuck are you talking about, man? But anyway, this is a great book. Lots of info in it on every aspect of Sabbath's career, and that's what matters. That's what we're looking for with something like this. So get Doom Let Loose and get this one. 2 best Black Sabbath books money can buy. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video where I talked about the Tony Martin stuff. You gotta pick these albums up. They are classics. And if you like this video, click like, leave me a comment, and click subscribe. I do a lot of horror movie reviews and shit like that, but I'll be making more music-related stuff in the future. If you want to see me talk about more fucking bands, more albums, and whatnot, hey man, I'm all for it. I'm a fan of a lot of good stuff and would love to share my thoughts on that kind of stuff with you. So I'll see you guys again next time.